My brother was the one person I trusted most in this world, until he stood in front of a judge, looked me in the eye, and used my deepest secret to destroy me. They say blood is thicker than water. But in that courtroom, my brother's words cut deeper than any knife ever could. I didn't come to court for money, I came for justice. The moment he said those 3 words about me, the whole room went silent. Even the judge stopped writing. That's when I knew this was going to be worse than I ever imagined. For 32 years, I called him my protector, but when the truth came out, he didn't just deny it. He tried to convince everyone I was crazy. I thought losing my parents was the hardest thing I'd ever face. Then I watched my own brother volunteer to destroy me. My name is Emily Harrison, and I am going to tell you a story about my brother. It is not an easy story to tell. For a long time, I could not tell it at all. The words would get stuck in my throat, and my hands would start to shake, and I would have to stop and breathe and remind myself that the worst was over. But I am ready now. I am ready to tell you everything. My name is Emily, and this is the story of how my brother tried to destroy me and how a judge I had never met before saved my life. I was born on a crisp October morning in a small town in Ohio, the second child of Thomas and Margaret Harrison. My brother Michael was 2 years older than me, and by all accounts, he was not pleased when I arrived. My mother loved to tell the story of how he would stand by my crib and stare at me with suspicion, as if I were an intruder who had somehow snuck into his territory. But somewhere along the way, that suspicion turned into something else. It turned into protection. When I was 4 years old, I fell off my tricycle and scraped my knee so badly that I still have the scar today. I remember sitting on the sidewalk, crying so hard I could not breathe, the blood dripping down my leg and staining my new white sneakers. Michael, who was 6, came running out of the house. He did not make fun of me. He did not run to get our parents. He just sat down right next to me on the hot concrete, put his arm around my shoulders, and said, "It's okay, Emmy. I'm here. I won't let anything bad happen to you." And I believed him. I believed him with the absolute faith that only a little sister can have in her big brother. That belief carried us through childhood. Michael was the one who walked me to school every morning, holding my hand when we crossed the busy streets. He was the one who taught me how to ride a 2-wheeler, running behind me until his lungs burned, refusing to let go until I found my balance. He was the one who stood up for me when the neighborhood kids teased me for my glasses, for my shyness, for the way I always had my nose buried in a book. I remember one particular afternoon when I was in 3rd grade. A boy on the bus, a 5th grader named Derek with mean eyes and a cruel laugh, had spent the entire ride home making fun of my braids. He called me names I will not repeat here. I got off the bus in tears, and when Michael saw my face, he did not ask questions. He just set his jaw in that way he had, and the next morning, he confronted Derek on the bus. I do not know what he said, but Derek never bothered me again. That was Michael, my protector, my hero. Our parents ran a small accounting firm together, Harrison and Harrison Financial Services. They worked long hours, but they always made time for us. Sunday dinners were sacred. We would gather around the big oak table in the kitchen, the one that had been in our family for 3 generations, and we would talk and laugh and argue about everything and nothing. My mother made the best pot roast in the county, and my father would tell terrible jokes that made us groan. And Michael would kick me under the table when I talked with my mouth full, and I would kick him back. Those were the best years of my life. I did not know it then, of course. You never know it when you are living it. You think it will always be like that the people you love will always be there, that the world will always feel safe and warm and full of possibility. But the world has a way of proving you wrong. Michael and I went to the same college, a small state school about 2 hours from home. It was understood that we would stay close, that we would always be within driving distance, that the family would remain intact. Michael studied accounting, following in our father's footsteps. I studied graphic design, a choice that puzzled my parents but that they supported anyway. "Be happy, Emmy," my father said when I told him. "That's all we want for you." In college, Michael met Sarah. She was pretty and poised and came from a good family, and my parents adored her immediately. They got married the summer after graduation, a beautiful outdoor ceremony with white flowers and string quartets and more relatives than I could count. I was her bridesmaid. I stood up there in a hideous peach dress and smiled until my cheeks hurt, and I was genuinely happy for them. Michael deserved someone like Sarah. He deserved a perfect life. I moved to the West Coast after college, to a city that glittered and hummed with energy. I had a job offer from a small design firm, and I was ready for adventure. Michael stayed in Ohio. He joined our father's accounting firm, bought a house 3 streets away from our parents, and started planning for the family he and Sarah would eventually have. Our phone calls became less frequent. Not because we were angry at each other, not because of any fight or disagreement, but simply because life got in the way. He was building his life there. I was building mine here. We would talk on birthdays and holidays, catching up in that rushed, superficial way that people do when they do not really know each other anymore. He would tell me about work, about Sarah, about the new deck he was building. I would tell him about my latest projects, about the city, about the friends I was making. It was enough. Or at least, I told myself it was enough. Looking back now, I can see the distance growing, like a crack in a windshield that starts small and then spreads until everything shatters. But at the time, I did not notice. I was too busy living my life, chasing my dreams, becoming the person I was meant to be. I had no idea that the worst was yet to come. It started when I was 29. I do not know why it started. There was no single event, no trauma, no obvious trigger. I was successful at work. I had a boyfriend named David who was kind and handsome and made me laugh. I had friends who loved me. On paper, my life was perfect. But inside, something was wrong. It began as a vague sense of unease, a feeling that something was off but that I could not quite name. I would be sitting at my desk, working on a design, and suddenly my thoughts would scatter like leaves in the wind. I could not concentrate. I could not focus. I would stare at my computer screen for hours, getting nothing done. Then came the exhaustion. Not the normal tiredness that comes after a long day, but a bone-deep weariness that no amount of sleep could fix. I would sleep 10, 12 hours and wake up feeling like I had not rested at all. My limbs felt heavy. My mind felt foggy. Everything required effort, even getting out of bed, even brushing my teeth, even making a cup of coffee. I started canceling plans with friends. It was too hard to be social, too hard to pretend to be okay. I would make excuses. Work was busy, I was not feeling well, maybe next time, and then I would lie on my couch for hours, staring at the ceiling, feeling nothing and everything at once. David tried to be understanding at first. He would bring me soup when I said I was tired, rub my back when I seemed sad, give me space when I needed it. But as the weeks turned into months, his patience began to wear thin. "What's going on with you?" he asked one night, his voice a mixture of frustration and concern. "You're not yourself, you're never yourself anymore." "I don't know," I said, and it was the truth. I don't know what's wrong with me. The panic attacks started 6 months in. The first one happened at work, in the middle of a presentation to a major client. I was standing in front of a room full of people, explaining my design concept, when suddenly my heart started racing. It felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. I could not breathe. The room started spinning, and the faces in front of me blurred into meaningless shapes. I excused myself and fled to the bathroom, locking myself in a stall and sliding down to the floor. I sat there for 20 minutes, shaking uncontrollably, gasping for air, convinced that I was dying. When it finally passed, I was drenched in sweat and so exhausted I could barely stand. After that, the panic attacks became a regular part of my life. They came without warning at any time in any place. In the grocery store, on the subway, in the middle of the night, jolting me awake with my heart pounding and my sheets soaked with sweat. I started avoiding things, places, people. The world shrank around me until my apartment became my only safe space. I stopped going to work. I stopped answering my phone. I stopped eating. David left 3 months before my diagnosis. I do not blame him. He was not a bad person. He was just a person who did not know how to handle what was happening to me. He stood in my doorway with a suitcase in his hand, his face twisted with guilt and relief. "I can't do this anymore, Emily," he said. "I'm sorry, I just can't." I nodded. I did not have the energy to fight, to beg, to explain. I just watched him walk out the door and wondered if I would ever feel anything again. I finally went to a doctor after my boss called to say that if I did not come back to work, I would be fired. It was the kick I needed. I made an appointment with a psychiatrist named Dr. Evans, a kind older man with a gentle voice and patient eyes. He listened to me for over an hour. He did not interrupt. He did not judge. He just listened, taking notes, nodding occasionally, letting me tell my story in my own words and my own time. When I finished, he set down his pen and looked at me with something that might have been compassion. "Emily," he said, "I believe you are suffering from major depressive disorder, compounded by severe anxiety. Have you heard of these conditions before?" I had, of course. Everyone has. But hearing the words applied to me, hearing them spoken aloud in that quiet office, was something else entirely. It was terrifying, and at the same time, it was a relief. There was a name for what was happening to me. There was a reason. I was not broken, I was sick. Dr. Evans prescribed medication and therapy. He explained that it would take time, that recovery was not linear, that there would be good days and bad days. He told me that I was not alone, that millions of people struggled with the same things, that there was hope. I did not believe him at first, but I took the medication anyway. I went to therapy anyway. And slowly, painfully, incrementally, I started to get better. The medication helped quiet the noise in my head. The therapy helped me understand where the noise came from. I learned coping mechanisms. I learned to recognize my triggers. I learned that my illness was not a character flaw, not a sign of weakness, but a medical condition that required treatment and management, just like diabetes or high blood pressure. It took a year before I felt like myself again. A year of trial and error with medications, a year of weekly therapy sessions, a year of small victories and crushing setbacks. But I made it. I came out the other side. I found a new job, a smaller firm with a more understanding boss. I started reconnecting with friends, slowly and carefully. I started running, which helped with the anxiety. I started living again. The one person I could not seem to reach was Michael. I called him on a Sunday afternoon, 3 months after my diagnosis. I had been putting it off, dreading it, rehearsing what I would say. But I knew I had to tell him. He was my brother. He deserved to know. He answered on the second ring. "Hey Em, long time no talk, everything okay?" I took a deep breath. "Michael, I need to tell you something, it's important." "Sure, what's up?" I told him. I explained about the depression, the anxiety, the diagnosis, the treatment. I tried to use the words Dr. Evans had given me, the clinical terms that made it sound like a real illness instead of a personal failure. I told him I was getting better, that I was on medication, that I was seeing a therapist. I told him I was going to be okay. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. When Michael finally spoke, his voice was different. Cooler, distant. "So you're on pills now," he said. It was not a question. "Yes. They help regulate the chemicals in my brain." "Chemicals in your brain." He repeated the words slowly, as if tasting them, finding them unpleasant. "Em, you were always the dramatic one. Mom and Dad said you just needed to come home for a while, get some rest. All that city life, it's too much. You've always been sensitive." The word hit me like a slap. Sensitive, as if that was all it was. As if I had chosen this, manufactured it, blown things out of proportion for attention. "It's not like that, Michael," I said, my voice shaking. "It's a real illness. There's research, there's science." "I'm not saying it's not real," he interrupted, though that was exactly what he was saying. "I'm just saying maybe you need to simplify your life. Come home for a while. Let us take care of you." I tried to explain again, but he was not listening. He had already made up his mind. In his world, mental illness was something that happened to other people, weak people, people who just needed to pull themselves together and get on with it. It could not happen to his sister. It could not happen to someone he loved. We hung up a few minutes later, both of us pretending the conversation had gone better than it had. But I knew. I knew that something had shifted between us, something that might never be put right. Our mother died 2 years later. A stroke, sudden and massive. She was gone before the ambulance even arrived. I flew home for the funeral. The house felt empty without her, hollow and echoing. My father moved through the rooms like a ghost, his eyes red-rimmed, his voice barely a whisper. Michael and I stood side by side at the grave, watching them lower her into the ground, and for a moment, we were brother and sister again. He put his arm around me, and I leaned into him, and we cried together. 6 months later, our father died too. The doctors said it was a heart attack, but we all knew the truth. He died of a broken heart. He could not live without her. I went home again. Another funeral, another grave, another hole in my heart that would never fully heal. After the service, Michael and I sat in the empty house, surrounded by boxes and memories. The house was ours now, along with everything in it. Our parents had left everything to both of us equally, as it should be. "I'll handle everything," Michael said. "The estate, the paperwork, all of it, you go back to your life. I'll take care of it." I should have questioned him. I should have asked for details, for timelines, for a plan. But I was too deep in my grief to think straight. I trusted him. He was my brother. He had always taken care of me. "Thank you," I said. "I don't know what I'd do without you." He smiled, that same smile from childhood, the one that meant everything was going to be okay. "That's what brothers are for, Emmy." I went back to the West Coast. He stayed in Ohio. And for the next year, I did not think about the house or the estate or any of it. I was too busy trying to survive my grief, trying to hold on to my recovery, trying to keep my head above water. I had no idea that while I was drowning, Michael was building himself a life raft out of my trust. A year after Dad died, I decided it was time to sell my share of the house. I was doing better. The grief had softened into something I could carry. I wanted to buy a small place of my own, something permanent, something that was mine. I called Michael to discuss it. "I want to buy you out, Em," he said immediately. "It's cleaner that way. No real estate agents, no strangers, no complications. I'll have my lawyer draw up the papers." Relieved, I agreed. "Okay, that sounds good. So what's the value?" "We should probably get an independent appraisal." "I've already had one done," he said. "For the estate, it's appraised at $250, so your half is $125. $125,000. It sounded like a lot of money. But something prickled at the back of my mind, a tiny voice I could not quite ignore. "Michael, that seems low. I've been looking at real estate online, just out of curiosity, and houses on Maple Street are going for way more than that." He sighed, the sigh of a patient man dealing with a difficult child. "Those are renovated houses, Em. Ours is dated. Dad let a lot of things go. The roof is old, the furnace is on its last legs, the kitchen hasn't been updated since the 80s. The appraisal reflects the current condition. If you want to get your own appraisal, go ahead, but it'll just cost you money and time, and the number won't be much different." I did not get my own appraisal. I did not hire a lawyer. I did not question him. I signed the papers he sent, accepted the check for $125,000, and tried to convince myself it was fair. But that prickling feeling never fully went away. 6 months later, I saw the listing. I was scrolling through a real estate app on my phone, idly looking at properties, when a familiar picture stopped me cold. It was my parents' house. My house, the one I had grown up in. The listing price, $529,000. My hands started shaking. I clicked on the listing, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. The pictures showed fresh paint, new countertops, gleaming hardwood floors. The description boasted of extensive recent renovations including new roof, new HVAC system, and completely updated kitchen and baths. I felt the blood drain from my face. He had lied to me. He had told me the house was worth nothing, then fixed it up and sold it for a fortune. He had used my trust, my grief, my illness to steal from me. I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at my phone, trying to process what I had discovered. My brother, my protector. The boy who had held my hand on the way to school, who had defended me from bullies, who had promised never to let anything bad happen to me. He had become the thing I needed protecting from. I hired a lawyer. Her name was Patricia Lewis, and she was everything I needed. Sharp, compassionate, and utterly unshakable. I told her the whole story, from childhood to diagnosis to betrayal, and she listened without judgment. "He undervalued the asset during the buyout," she said when I finished. "He had a fiduciary duty to you as a co-heir, and he breached it. He used his knowledge of the property's potential to manipulate you into selling for far less than it was worth. This is fraud, Emily, clear and simple. What do? We sue him." The thought made me physically ill, suing my own brother. Dragging our family's dirty laundry into a courtroom, into the public record, into the light. But the anger was stronger than the sickness. The betrayal was deeper than the fear. "Okay," I said, "let's do it." The day I was served with Michael's response, I learned what true cruelty looked like. He did not just deny the fraud. He counterattacked. His lawyer filed an affidavit from Michael that painted me as unstable, irrational, incapable of managing my own affairs. It detailed my history of mental illness, my erratic behavior, my inability to make sound decisions. He had taken the most vulnerable part of me, the part I had trusted him with, and turned it into a weapon. Patty called me immediately. "Emily, I need you to sit down." I sat. His response: "He's using your medical history to argue that you weren't in a fit state of mind to handle the transaction. He's claiming that you were too mentally ill to understand what you were signing." The world stopped. The phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. I sat there in my apartment, alone, staring at nothing, while the words echoed in my head. Mentally ill. He called me mentally ill. Not as a diagnosis, not as a fact, but as an insult, a weapon, a way to destroy me. My own brother. The months leading up to the trial were the hardest of my life. Harder than the depression. Harder than the panic attacks. Harder than losing my parents. Because this time, the enemy was someone I loved. Patty and I worked tirelessly. We gathered every piece of evidence we could find. Medical records from Dr. Evans, documenting my diagnosis and treatment. Letters from my therapist, attesting to my competence and stability. Emails and text messages showing that I was functioning, working, living a normal life. Real estate reports proving the true value of the house. Photographs of the renovations Michael had done, proving he had planned them all along. We built a case brick by brick. But the most important part, Patty said, was me. "When you take the stand, Emily, you have to be yourself. You have to tell your story. Don't let them turn you into a victim. You're not a victim, you're a survivor." I repeated those words to myself every night before I went to sleep. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. On the morning of the trial, I stood in front of my mirror and looked at myself for a long time. The woman looking back at me was pale and tired, but her eyes were clear. She was ready. I put on a simple navy blue dress, the one I wore to important meetings, and I walked out the door. The courthouse was an imposing building of gray stone and marble floors. The courtroom itself was smaller than I expected, intimate almost, with wooden benches and high ceilings and the smell of old paper and furniture polish. Michael was already there, sitting at the defendant's table with his lawyer, Mr. Sterling, the same expensive-looking man who had filed the affidavit. Sarah sat in the front row behind them, her face tight with anxiety. She would not look at me. Patty guided me to our table. We sat down and I tried to steady my breathing. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Just like my therapist taught me, the bailiff called for all rise. Judge Harriet Vance entered the room, a woman with iron gray hair and eyes that seemed to see everything at once. She took her seat behind the bench, adjusted her glasses, and surveyed the room. "Let's begin," she said. The proceedings were slow and methodical. Mr. Sterling presented their case first, arguing that the original agreement was valid, that the appraisal was accurate, that I had signed of my own free will. He spoke of my history of emotional instability with a kind of fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. Then it was Patty's turn. She laid out the facts calmly, clearly, devastatingly. The real estate values, the timing of the renovations, the suspiciously low appraisal, the fraud. And then Michael took the stand. Watching my brother testify was like watching a stranger perform a role. He was calm, composed, believable. He spoke of his concern for me, his desire to protect me, his fear that I was not capable of handling the complexities of the estate. "I love my sister," he said, looking at the judge with earnest eyes. "I always have. But after our parents died, she was in a fragile state. She had a history of mental health issues, and I was worried about her. I thought I was doing the right thing by simplifying things, by taking the burden off her." Mr. Sterling nodded sympathetically. "And at the time of the agreement, did you believe your sister was capable of making a sound financial decision?" Michael paused. He looked down at his hands, then back at the judge. "I loved her," he said, "but no, I didn't think she was in a position to handle it. She wasn't well." The words hit me like stones. He made it sound so reasonable, so caring. He made it sound like he was the hero of this story, the long-suffering brother doing his best for a difficult sister. Patty rose for the cross-examination. She approached him slowly, her eyes never leaving his face. "Mr. Harrison, you say you were concerned for your sister's well-being. Is that correct?" Yes. And this concern led you to manage the estate for her? Yes. And did this concern also lead you to get an independent appraisal of the property? He hesitated. Yes, I told you we had an appraisal done. An appraisal that valued the home at $250,000. Is that correct? Yes. Patty walked back to our table and picked up a document. Mr. Harrison, I'm showing you what's been marked as Plaintiff's Exhibit C. Can you tell the court what that is? He looked at it. His face paled slightly. It's a real estate listing. For what property? My parents' house. And what is the listing price? A long pause. $529,000. And the date of this listing? He gave the date. 6 months after he bought my share. And the renovations mentioned in this listing, the new roof, the new HVAC, the updated kitchen, were these completed before or after you purchased your sister's share of the property? After. After, Patty repeated. So you bought your sister's half of a house for $125,000, based on an appraisal that valued the entire property at $250,000, then spent money renovating it, and 6 months later listed it for more than double that value. Is that accurate? Michael's lawyer objected, but Judge Vance overruled him. It's business, Michael stammered. I took a risk. The renovations were a risk. A risk you took with an asset you acquired for far less than its market value from a sister you claim was too mentally ill to know what she was doing. The words hung in the air like smoke. Michael did not answer. Patty pressed on. Did you, at any point, suggest that your sister get her own independent appraisal? Did you advise her to seek legal counsel before signing away her inheritance? No, he mumbled. I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. No, he said louder, his face red with anger. Patty nodded. No further questions, Your Honor. She sat down, and I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. She had done what she needed to do. She had exposed him, but the worst was yet to come. After a short recess, Mr. Sterling called me to the stand. I walked on shaky legs and took the oath, my hand trembling as I swore to tell the truth. Patty guided me through my story gently. I talked about my childhood, my diagnosis, my recovery. I talked about my parents' death, my trust in Michael, the moment I discovered the truth. I tried to stay calm, to stick to the facts, to be the credible witness Patty needed me to be. Then it was Mr. Sterling's turn. He approached me with a smile that did not reach his eyes. Miss Harrison, we've heard a lot today about your mental health struggles. These episodes of depression and anxiety, they must be very difficult for you. They are, I said, but I manage them. And these episodes, they can affect your judgment, can't they? Your perception of reality? No, I said firmly. My illness affects my mood, my energy, my ability to feel pleasure. It doesn't make me delusional. It doesn't make me unable to read a number or understand a contract. He smiled again, that same cold smile. He walked to his table and picked up a sheaf of papers. Miss Harrison, I have here copies of emails and text messages you sent to your brother during the period in question. In one of them, you write, and I quote, I feel like I'm disappearing. The world is made of glass, and I'm scared I'm going to shatter it. Would you say that's a rational statement from someone in a sound state of mind? I took a deep breath. It's a metaphorical description of how I was feeling at the time. It's a symptom of depression, not evidence of insanity. He ignored my answer and moved on. He read more messages, more emails, more fragments of my pain. A voicemail transcript where I was crying so hard I could barely speak. A text where I said I could not get out of bed. A journal entry I had shared with Michael in a moment of vulnerability, now being read aloud in a courtroom full of strangers. With each word, I felt myself shrinking. He was parading my illness, my suffering, my darkest moments for everyone to see. And he was using them to prove that I was crazy, that I could not be trusted, that I deserved what my brother had done to me. When he finished, he sat down, a satisfied smirk on his face. Patty looked at me with concern, but I could not meet her eyes. I felt hollowed out, emptied, destroyed. And then Michael took the stand again for redirect. And he delivered the final blow. Mr. Sterling stood and approached his client. Mr. Harrison, you've heard your sister's testimony. You've heard her describe her illness, her struggles, her recovery. Based on your lifelong experience with her, do you believe that at the time of the property agreement, she was in a position to make a sound, rational, informed financial decision? Michael looked at me. For just a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt, regret, Love, I will never know. It vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. He turned to the judge. Your Honor, I love my sister, I always have. But the truth is, she has been mentally ill for years. She's not the same person I grew up with. At the time of the agreement, she wasn't capable. She wasn't in her right mind. I did what I thought was best to protect the family's assets and to take a burden off her shoulders. She wasn't well. The words landed like bombs, one after another exploding in the silent room. Mentally ill, not capable. Not in her right mind. Not well, he said it. My brother. The boy who held my hand on the way to school. The teenager who defended me from bullies. The man I had trusted with my life, my grief, my inheritance. He said it in a court of law, under oath for the record. He called me mentally ill not as a fact, but as a weapon. I could not breathe. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the witness stand so hard my knuckles turned white. A tear escaped and rolled down my cheek. Then another. Then a flood. The silence was absolute. No one moved. No one spoke. Even Mr. Sterling seemed momentarily stunned by the cruelty of what had just been said. Judge Vance looked at Michael for a long moment. Her face was unreadable. Then she looked at me, and in her eyes I saw something that made my heart clench. She saw me. Patty rose slowly. She walked to the bench and spoke quietly with the judge. I could not hear what they said, but after a moment Judge Vance nodded. Miss Harrison, she said, her voice gentle, your attorney has requested that you be allowed to address the court directly. This is highly unusual, but I am going to permit it. Is there something you wish to say? I looked at Patty. She nodded. I looked at the judge. She waited. I stood up. My legs were shaking so badly I had to hold onto the witness stand for support, but I stood. Your Honor, I began, my voice barely a whisper. I cleared my throat and tried again. Your Honor, my brother's lawyer just read you emails and texts from the worst period of my life. He read you words written in the middle of the night, when I was so deep in the darkness I couldn't see the light. He read you the words of a sick person, and that's what I was sick. I paused, gathering my thoughts. But being sick doesn't make me stupid. Having depression doesn't mean I can't read a number on a page. Having anxiety doesn't mean I don't know what a fair price for my own childhood home is. My illness affects my emotions. It drains my energy. It sometimes makes me feel like the world is ending. But it has never, not once, made me unable to see the truth. My voice grew stronger. The shaking in my legs began to subside. The truth is simple, Your Honor. My brother saw an opportunity. He knew I was vulnerable. He knew I was grieving. He knew I was exhausted from just trying to get through each day. And instead of helping me, he used my own struggles against me. He made me doubt myself, just like he's trying to make this court doubt me now. I turned to look at Michael. He was staring at me, his face pale, his eyes wide. He called me mentally ill today. He said it like it was a dirty word, like it meant I was broken, less than incapable. He said it to destroy me, to make you believe that my voice doesn't matter. But I'm here to tell you that it does. Another tear fell, but I did not wipe it away. My illness is a part of me. It's a battle I fight every single day. And some days I lose. But I am here in this courtroom fighting for what is mine, not because I'm crazy, but because I was wronged. My illness gave him the perfect cover, the perfect excuse to cheat me. And he took it. He didn't see his sister. He saw a mark. I turned back to the judge. I'm not asking for your pity, Your Honor. I'm just asking you to see me, not as the mentally ill sister my brother wants you to see, but as Emily Harrison, a woman who works hard, who pays her bills, who takes her medication, who goes to therapy, who has friends who love her, and who trusted her brother so completely that she signed a paper without a second thought. And he betrayed that trust in the cruelest way possible. He took my home, my past, and tried to use my own pain to get away with it. That's the truth, all of it. I stopped. The room was so quiet I could hear my own heartbeat. Then I sat down. For a long moment, no one moved. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until it felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then Judge Vance spoke. Mr. Sterling, sit down. He had been half rising from his chair, clearly preparing to object. He sat. Judge Vance looked at me, then at Michael, then back at me. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but carried to every corner of the room. I have been a judge for over 23 years. In that time, I have presided over thousands of cases. I have seen divorces that would make your blood run cold. I have seen custody battles where parents tore each other apart while their children watched. I have seen fraud cases involving millions of dollars. I thought I had seen it all. I thought I had become immune to the cruelty that people can inflict upon one another. She paused. I was wrong. She turned her gaze to Michael. Mr. Harrison, I want you to look at me. He raised his head slowly, his face ashen. Your sister came into this courtroom today seeking justice. She came here because she believed you had wronged her. And the evidence presented before this court overwhelmingly supports that belief. You undervalued an asset. You used your position as her brother, as the executor of your parents' estate, to manipulate a transaction that benefited you enormously at her expense. That is fraud, plain and simple. Michael opened his mouth, but she held up a hand. But that is not the worst of it. The worst of it is what you did today, in this courtroom, under oath. You took your sister's pain, you took her struggles. You took a medical condition that she has fought every single day to manage, and you weaponized it. You stood on that witness stand, and you called her mentally ill, not out of concern, not out of love, but as a calculated legal strategy to destroy her credibility. Her voice rose. I have sat on this bench and watched families tear each other apart over money. But I have never, in all my years, witnessed a brother do what you did today. I have never seen anyone take something so personal, so private, so painful, and drag it into the light for the sole purpose of causing harm. She shook her head slowly. You didn't just cheat your sister out of money, Mr. Harrison. You tried to cheat her out of her dignity. You tried to convince this court that she was not capable of knowing her own mind, of understanding her own rights, of fighting for her own justice. You tried to use her illness to erase her. She turned to the documents on her bench. The evidence in this case is clear and convincing. The property was appraised at $250,000 at the time of the buyout. That appraisal was inaccurate and misleading. Comparable homes were selling for significantly more. 6 months after purchasing your sister's share for $125,000, you listed the property for $529,000 after completing renovations you had already planned. She picked up her pen. Therefore, it is the ruling of this court that the original agreement between Emily Harrison and Michael Harrison regarding the buyout of the family home is hereby declared null and void. Mr. Harrison, you are ordered to pay your sister the full fair market value of her half of the property, which this court sets at $264,500. You are ordered to pay statutory interest on that amount from the date of the original sale. You are ordered to pay all court costs, and you are ordered to pay the plaintiff's reasonable legal fees. She set down her pen. The total judgment against you is approximately $340,000. Michael's face went gray. Sarah gasped behind him, but Judge Vance was not finished. She looked directly at me. Miss Harrison, I want to apologize to you. I want to apologize on behalf of a system that too often fails people who are struggling with mental health challenges. I want to apologize that you had to come into this courtroom and defend not just your financial rights, but your very humanity. I want to apologize that your brother, the person who should have protected you, instead chose to exploit the very condition that made you vulnerable. Her voice softened. You spoke today with courage. You spoke with clarity. You spoke with a dignity that I do not often witness in this courtroom. And in doing so, you taught everyone here a lesson. You taught us that mental illness does not define a person. You taught us that struggle does not equal weakness. You taught us that the truth, when spoken from the heart, has a power that no legal strategy can overcome. She turned back to Michael. Mr. Harrison, I hope you understand what you have lost today. It is not just money. It is not just a legal battle. You have lost your sister. You have lost the trust that should exist between family. You have lost the moral high ground that you never actually had. And I hope, for your sake, that someday you come to regret what you did here today. Not because of the judgment I have imposed, but because of the human being you chose to betray. She picked up her gavel. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. The sound echoed through the silent room like a thunderclap, and it was over. For a long moment, no one moved. The sound of the gavel seemed to echo in the silent room. Then, slowly, people began to stir. The court reporter began gathering her things. The bailiff straightened his posture. Mr. Sterling leaned over to whisper something to Michael, but Michael did not respond. He just sat there, staring at nothing. Patty was at my side in an instant, her hand closed around my arm, warm and steadying. "Come on, Emily," she said softly. "Let's get out of here." I let her guide me to my feet. My legs felt like they belonged to someone else, weak and unsteady. As we walked up the aisle, I could feel eyes on me. The few people in the audience, a young woman who I think was a law student, an older man who had been waiting for his own case to be called, they were all looking at me with expressions I could not quite read. Respect, maybe, or curiosity, or just the natural human response to witnessing something profound. As we passed Michael's table, I could not help myself. I glanced over. He was still sitting there, his head bowed, his hands clasped in front of him on the table. Sarah had moved to his side and was whispering something to him, but he did not seem to hear her. He looked small, diminished, like a balloon that had been deflated. For just a moment, a tiny flicker of something stirred in my chest. Not pity exactly, not sympathy, but a faint echo of the love I had once felt for him, the ghost of the brother I had lost. Then I remembered his words on the stand. "She is mentally ill. She was not in her right mind." I remembered the cold, calculated way he had said them, the way he had looked at the judge, not at me, as he delivered the final blow. The flicker died. I kept walking. The hallway outside the courtroom was bright and cold, the fluorescent lights harsh after the dim warmth of the courtroom. Patty guided me to a bench against the wall and gently pushed me down onto it. "Sit," she commanded. "Breathe. I'm going to go deal with the clerk and get the paperwork started. I'll be right back." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. She squeezed my shoulder and walked away, her heels clicking sharply on the tile floor. I sat there alone and tried to process what had just happened. I had won. The word echoed in my mind, but it did not feel real. It felt like something that had happened to someone else in some other life. I had spent so long preparing for this day, so long bracing myself for the possibility of losing, that victory felt foreign, uncomfortable, like a shoe that did not quite fit. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and looked at the screen. It was a text from an unknown number. I opened it, my thumb trembling slightly over the glass. It was a photo. A photo of my parents' house, the one I had grown up in, the one Michael had sold. It was a beautiful shot, taken from the street, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the lawn. The new owners had painted it a soft gray, and there were flowers in the window boxes that had not been there when we lived in it. It looked happy. It looked loved. Beneath the photo, a caption, "It was never about the house. It was always about us. I'm sorry I forgot that." I stared at the message for a long time. I did not know who had sent it. There was no name, no identifying information. It could have been Michael, trying to find a way back, trying to bridge the chasm he had created. It could have been Sarah, acting on her own, hoping to soften the blow. It could have been someone else entirely, someone who had heard the story and felt moved to reach out. It did not matter. The words were true. It was never about the house. It was about trust and love and the devastating realization that the person who is supposed to have your back can sometimes be the one holding the knife. I slipped the phone back into my pocket and leaned my head against the cold wall behind me. The tears came then, finally, not in a trickle but in a flood. They were tears of release, of exhaustion, of grief for the brother I had lost and the family that would never be whole again. They were also tears of relief, of validation, of the strange, painful joy that comes from being truly seen. Patty found me like that a few minutes later, tears streaming down my face, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. She did not say anything. She just sat down next to me, put her arm around me, and let me cry. We stayed like that for a long time. The weeks that followed were a blur of paperwork and phone calls and meetings with Patty. Michael's lawyer tried to appeal, but the appeal was denied. The judgment stood. The money, when it finally arrived, felt strange and insubstantial. It was just numbers in a bank account, digits on a screen. It did not bring my parents back. It did not undo the betrayal. It did not heal the wound that Michael had carved into my heart. But it did give me something I had not expected: freedom. For the first time in years, I was not constantly worried about money. I could pay off my debts. I could put a down payment on a small, cozy apartment in a quiet neighborhood. I could afford my therapy sessions without stress, my medication without anxiety. I could breathe. I threw myself into my work, throwing all the energy I had once spent on worry and grief into my designs. My portfolio grew. My reputation grew. I started getting offers from bigger firms, better clients. For the first time since my diagnosis, I felt like I was moving forward, not just treading water. I also started reaching out, slowly and carefully, to rebuild the connections I had let wither. I called old friends, the ones who had drifted away during my darkest days. Some of them were hesitant, unsure how to respond to the person I had become. But others, the real ones, welcomed me back with open arms. They listened to my story without judgment. They apologized for not understanding, for not being there. They asked questions, real questions, about my illness and my recovery. They wanted to learn. They wanted to understand. I started going to a support group for people with depression and anxiety. It was strange at first, sitting in a circle with strangers, sharing the most intimate details of my life. But slowly, I came to treasure those meetings. There was something powerful about being in a room full of people who understood, who did not need explanations or justifications, who simply nodded and said, "Yes, I know exactly what you mean." And I started writing. Not for publication, not for anyone else, but for myself. I kept a journal, filling page after page with thoughts and feelings and memories. I wrote about my parents, about the house, about Michael. I wrote about the darkness and the light, the despair and the hope. I wrote about the day in court, the moment I stood up and spoke my truth, the look on Judge Vance's face as she delivered her ruling. Writing became a kind of therapy, a way of processing everything that had happened, of making sense of the senseless. 6 months after the trial, I got a letter. It was hand-delivered, no return address, just my name in unfamiliar handwriting. I recognized the postmark, our hometown. My heart clenched as I tore it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, folded neatly. I unfolded it and began to read. "Emily, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to respond. I don't expect anything from you at all, but I need to write it. I need to say it, even if you never see these words, even if they just disappear into the void." I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything. I told myself lies for years. I told myself I was protecting you. I told myself you could not handle the truth. I told myself I was doing what was best for the family. But that was all just a story I made up to justify what I was really doing, looking out for myself. When you got sick, I did not know how to handle it. I did not understand. I was scared. I was scared of what it meant, scared of not knowing how to help, scared of saying the wrong thing, so I did nothing. I pulled away. I told myself you were just going through a phase, that you would snap out of it, that it was not as bad as you said. I told myself that so I would not have to face it, so I would not have to be the brother you needed me to be. And then, when Mom and Dad died, I saw an opportunity. That is the ugliest truth of all. In my grief, in my confusion, I saw a chance to take something for myself, and I took it. I told myself you would not understand the finances. I told myself you were too fragile to handle it. I told myself I was just simplifying things, but that was a lie. I was stealing from you, plain and simple. I was stealing from my own sister. I have thought about that day in court every single day since it happened. I have replayed my words over and over in my head. I have heard myself calling you mentally ill like it was a weapon, like it was something to be ashamed of, and I have wanted to crawl out of my own skin. I do not know how I became that person. I do not know how I let fear and greed turn me into someone who could do that to the little sister I used to protect from bullies on the bus. I am not writing this to ask for forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I am not writing this to try to fix things. Some things cannot be fixed. I am writing this because you deserve to hear the truth, the real truth, not the lies I told myself and everyone else. You deserve to know that I know what I did. You deserve to know that I am ashamed. I sold the house. You know that. The money from that sale is long gone, spent on things that do not matter, on a life I thought I wanted. Sarah left me 3 months ago. She said she could not look at me the same way after seeing what I did in that courtroom. I do not blame her. I cannot look at myself the same way. I am seeing a therapist now. I am trying to understand why I did what I did, why I became the kind of person who could hurt someone I love. It is slow going. It is painful. But I am trying. I do not know if you will ever be able to think of me as your brother again. I do not know if there is any path back from the place I have gone. But I want you to know that I see you now. I see how strong you are. I see how brave you were to stand up in that courtroom and tell your truth. I see that my little sister, the one I thought was fragile and broken, is actually the strongest person I have ever known. I am sorry, Emily. I am sorry for everything. Michael, I read the letter 3 times. The first time I cried. The second time, I felt a strange, hollow ache in my chest. The third time, I just sat there, holding the paper in my hands, staring at the words without really seeing them. Part of me wanted to crumple it up and throw it away. Part of me wanted to call him immediately, to hear his voice, to try to find some way back to the relationship we had lost. Part of me wanted to show it to Patty, to get her legal opinion on what it might mean. Part of me wanted to burn it and pretend I had never read it. In the end, I did none of those things. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a drawer in my nightstand, and closed the drawer. I was not ready to respond. I was not ready to forgive. I was not even ready to think about what it meant. But I also was not ready to destroy it. It was a piece of my brother, the real brother, the one who had been buried under years of fear and greed and bad decisions. Maybe, someday, that brother would be someone I could talk to again. Maybe not. Time passed. Seasons changed. The world kept turning. I threw myself into my work with a new passion. I started taking on projects that mattered to me, projects that aligned with my values. I designed a logo for a mental health awareness nonprofit. And when they asked me to speak at their annual gala about why I had chosen to work with them, I said yes. I stood on a stage in front of 300 people and told my story. I talked about my diagnosis, my struggles, my recovery. I talked about the day in court, about my brother's words, about the judge who saw me. I talked about the letter in my drawer, the one I still had not answered. When I finished, the silence was absolute. And then the applause began. It started small, a few people clapping, and then it grew and grew until it was a roar. People stood up, people cheered, people cried. And in that moment, standing on that stage, I felt something I had never felt before. I felt proud. Not proud of my illness, not proud of my pain, but proud of myself. Proud of how far I had come, proud of the person I had become. After the gala, a woman approached me. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes and silver hair. She took my hands in hers and held them tightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "My daughter has bipolar disorder. She has struggled her whole life. She has been called every name in the book, been treated like she is less than human. I have watched her fight and fight and fight just to be seen as a person. Hearing you speak tonight, hearing you talk about that judge, about the moment you were finally seen, it gives me hope. It gives me hope that someday, the world will see my daughter the way that judge saw you." I hugged her then, right there in the middle of the crowded ballroom. We held each other for a long moment, two strangers connected by a shared understanding of pain and hope and the long, hard road to being seen. That night, I went home and took Michael's letter out of the drawer. I read it one more time. Then I got out a piece of paper and a pen, and I began to write. "Michael, I read your letter. I have read it many times. I kept it in a drawer for months, not sure what to do with it, not sure what to feel about it. I am still not sure. I want to be angry. I was angry for a long time. Some days I still am. But anger is exhausting, and I am tired of carrying it around. I want to forgive you. Part of me wants to pick up the phone and pretend none of it happened, to go back to the way things were before. But we both know that is not possible. Some things cannot be undone. I spoke at a gala tonight. I told my story to 300 strangers. I told them about you. I did not use your name, but I told them about my brother, about what he did, about what he said. And you know what? It did not hurt as much as it used to. The memory is still there, but the sharp edges have worn down. It has become a part of my story, not the whole story. I am glad you are seeing a therapist. I am glad you are trying to understand. That is more than I ever expected. That is more than a lot of people ever get. I do not know if we will ever be brother and sister again. I do not know if there is a path back from where we have been. But I am willing to leave the door open. Not wide open, not yet, but open a crack, enough for a little light to get through. Take care of yourself, Michael. I mean that. Emily, I sealed the letter, addressed it to his old address, and put it in the mailbox the next morning. I did not know if he still lived there. I did not know if he would get it. I did not know if he would respond. But it did not matter. The letter was not really for him. It was for me. It was my way of letting go, of releasing the last bit of weight I had been carrying. A few weeks later, I got a response. Just a few lines, handwritten on a simple card. Emily, thank you. A crack is more than I deserve. I will work on being worthy of it. Michael, I smiled, just a little, and put the card in the drawer next to his letter. Then I closed the drawer and went on with my day. 5 years have passed since that day in court. 5 years since my brother called me mentally ill and a judge saw the truth. So much has changed. I own my own design firm now. It is small, just me and 2 other designers, but we do work that matters. We create branding for nonprofits, for social enterprises, for organizations that are trying to make the world a better place. I love what I do. I love waking up every morning and going to work that feels meaningful. I am in a relationship now, a real one, with a man named David. Not the David from before, but a different David, a better one. He is a high school English teacher, patient and kind and endlessly understanding. He knows about my illness. He has seen me on my bad days, the days when the darkness creeps back in and I cannot get out of bed. He does not run. He does not judge. He just brings me tea and sits with me until it passes. He is the first person since my parents who has made me feel truly safe. Michael and I have talked a few times. Phone calls, mostly awkward and stilted at first, but slowly getting easier. He is still in therapy. He is still working on himself. He has never asked for money, never mentioned the judgment, never tried to pretend that what happened did not happen. We do not talk about the past much. We talk about the present, about small things, about the weather and our jobs and the books we are reading. It is not the relationship we had as children. It is not even close. But it is something. It is a start. Last month, I went back to our hometown for the first time since the trial. I drove past the old house, the one Michael had sold. The new owners had put up a swing set in the backyard, and there were children's toys scattered on the porch. It looked like a happy home. It looked like a family was being raised there, making new memories, building a new life. I sat in my car for a long time just looking at it, and then I drove away. I visited the cemetery where my parents are buried. I stood in front of their headstones, side by side, and I talked to them. I told them about my life, my work, my David. I told them about Michael, about the slow, tentative steps we were taking toward each other. I told them I missed them, that I wished they could see the person I had become. I told them I was okay. And for the first time in a very long time, I meant it. As I stood there, the sun breaking through the clouds, I thought about that day in court. I thought about Judge Vance's words about being seen. I thought about my brother's face as he delivered his cruel testimony. I thought about the moment I stood up and spoke my truth, not knowing if it would make any difference. It made all the difference. Not just in the courtroom, not just in the legal ruling, but in my life. In that moment, standing in front of a stranger in a black robe, I stopped being the victim of my story and became the hero. I stopped letting my illness define me and started defining myself. I stopped waiting for someone else to save me and saved myself. The road has not been easy. It has been long and hard and full of potholes. There have been setbacks, bad days, moments when the darkness felt overwhelming. But I have made it through all of them. I have made it through because I learned something essential. I am not my illness. I am not my brother's betrayal. I am not the sum of the bad things that have happened to me. I am Emily Harrison. I am a daughter, a sister, a friend, a partner, a designer, a fighter. I am a woman who has stared into the abyss and refused to fall. I am a woman who was called mentally ill in a court of law and walked out with her head held high. And I am just getting started. The sun was setting over the city as I stood on the balcony of my apartment, looking out at the lights beginning to twinkle on in the buildings below. David was inside, cooking dinner, humming some song I did not recognize. The smell of garlic and tomatoes drifted out through the open door. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I almost did not open it, but something made me tap the screen. It was a photo. A photo of a small lake cottage, the one our parents had owned, the one that had been part of the estate. I had forgotten about it, honestly. It had been sold separately, the proceeds divided, a small footnote in the larger drama. The photo showed the cottage at sunset, the water behind it glowing gold and orange. A new dock had been built, and there was a canoe pulled up on the shore. It looked peaceful. It looked like a place where someone could heal. Beneath the photo, a caption, "I bought it back. It's ours again. If you ever want to come home." I stared at the message for a long moment, then I smiled. I typed a response, quick and simple, "I am home. but I would love to visit. I hit send and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Inside, David called my name, asking if I wanted parmesan on my pasta. "I'll be right there," I called back. I stood on the balcony for one more moment, watching the last sliver of sun disappear below the horizon. The city hummed around me, a million lives being lived, a million stories being told. This was mine, and it was beautiful. I turned and walked inside, closing the door behind me. My name is Emily Harrison. I am 37 years old. I have a business I love, a man who loves me, and a brother I am learning to know again, one small step at a time. I still have bad days. The darkness still comes, sometimes without warning. But I have learned to live with it, to manage it, to not let it define me. I take my medication. I go to therapy. I talk to my support group. I do the work. And every morning when I look in the mirror, I see someone I used to not recognize. I see someone who has been through hell and come out the other side. I see someone who was called mentally ill in a court of law and walked out with her head held high. I see someone who refused to be erased. I see myself, and I am enough.